A New York judge has rejected President-elect Donald Trump's request to throw out his conviction in the criminal hush money case. Judge Juan Merchan said in a court filing Monday the Supreme Court's ruling giving presidents immunity from prosecution over official acts does not apply to this case. A jury convicted Trump in May on 34 counts of falsifying business records to conceal hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 election. Trump's sentencing had been delayed while the judge considered the impact of the Supreme Court's ruling. CBS News investigative reporter Graham Cates joins us now on the phone. Graham, how does Judge Merchan explain his decision?
Sure. He said that, first of all, that the majority of the evidence shown at trial, he said that all of the evidence shown at trial related to unofficial acts, even the stuff that happened when Trump was president. And this has been long a contention of prosecutors and has been the subject of other court decisions to other courts, saying essentially that the scheme to cover up a hush money payment couldn't possibly be construed as the official act of a president, but a personal matter. And he said that even the evidence that was challenged by Trump's attorneys, he backed up the prosecutor's contention that it was...
Guys, John speaking. You need to hear this today. Another federal court handed Trump a crushing defeat, dismantling the legal framework his attorneys have relied on to shield him from accountability. The ruling changes everything about his remaining legal battles, and sources say he reacted with fury. A crucial federal court just rejected Trump's motion to halt prosecution efforts and move key cases to federal courts, where he believed he would receive more sympathetic treatment from judges who might look more favorably upon his expansive claims of presidential power. The ruling did not just deny his request. It absolutely demolished his legal arguments, declaring in language that could not have been clearer that Trump's actions must face judicial scrutiny like any other citizens.
A small, what the prosecutors described as a sliver of the mountain of evidence, which the judge said overwhelmingly pointed towards Trump's guilt in the case.
Graham, what happens next in terms of potential sentencing, and do you expect Trump's lawyers, can they appeal? Do you expect they will, and can they appeal?
They can appeal this decision and are likely to, and they separately have said that they will appeal the conviction if they need to. They aren't yet able to until the sentencing is dealt with in some way. And so that's what's outstanding here. There's another motion to dismiss the case that the judge hasn't ruled on. And that motion essentially says you have to dismiss the case and throw out the conviction because Trump was elected president and he has constitutional responsibilities that this will weigh down on. And the judge has to make a ruling on that motion and then decide if he's going to sentence Trump before inauguration, if he's going to push off sentencing and other proceedings until after Trump's term in office, potentially 2029, or take some other route in order for this case to be taken care of, or follow what the Trump's team says and toss it out altogether.
And that occupying the Oval Office does not place you beyond the reach of the law, regardless of how many times you assert otherwise or how many high-priced attorneys you deploy to make that argument in courtrooms across the country. Can you believe this? Trump's legal team has been pushing this theory for years now, this notion that he possesses some form of magical immunity that shields him from accountability for virtually everything he has ever done or will ever do. And court after court keeps telling them that is not how the Constitution operates. That is not how the American legal system functions. And that being president does not grant you a get-out-of-jail-free card that applies to every situation you might face.
We have breaking news tonight in Donald Trump's criminal case in Washington, D.C. This is the coup trial, where Trump is charged with 4 felonies connected to his efforts to steal the 2020 election and stay in power. The judge in that case, Judge Tanya Chutkan, just filed an order responding to Trump's motion asking she recuse herself from the case. Trump actually began demanding Chutkan's refusal within days of his indictment on August 1st, announcing that he had very powerful grounds for his request. Earlier this month, when he filed his motion, the grounds didn't look quite so powerful. His lawyers based the motion on things Judge Chutkan said at hearings for 2 defendants facing sentencing for crimes at the Capitol on January 6th. His lawyers arguing that Judge Chutkan had, quote, suggested President Trump should be prosecuted and imprisoned. Well, in her 20-page response today, Judge Chutkan basically said they were making things up, writing, "At the outset, it bears noting the court has never taken the position the defense ascribes to it, that former President Trump should be prosecuted and imprisoned. And the defense does not cite any instance of the court ever uttering those words or anything similar."
This latest judicial smackdown represents another harsh setback in Trump's ongoing crusade to avoid legal accountability amid a cluster of criminal and civil cases that are threatening his grip on power and his capacity to govern effectively during his second term. The walls are closing in from every possible direction, and Trump is rapidly exhausting his legal options to stop it, regardless of how much money he throws at lawyers or how many motions his team files in desperate attempts to delay the inevitable reckoning that has been building for years now. The federal appeals court upheld a district judge's denial of Trump's motion to move the Manhattan criminal hush money case to federal court, which was essentially his last remaining hope for escaping the consequences of his conviction in that case.
It is the defense, not the court, who has assumed the defendant belongs in that undefined group of people who should face charges. And to extrapolate an announcement of the defendant's guilt from the court's silence is to adopt a hypersensitive, cynical, and suspicious perspective rather than a reasonable one. Defendant's motion for recusal is denied. Shan Wu is a former federal prosecutor who served as counsel to Attorney General Janet Rito, and he joins me now. Shan, maybe we can start before we get into this of just what the standard for recusal is. I imagine it's got to be relatively high, right? I mean, the system works in these sort of random assignments of judges, and generally that you kind of get the judge you get. So what is the bar here?
It's a pretty high bar, Chris. It's the clear and convincing standard, which is actually the next highest to the highest one, which is beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal cases. So it's a very challenging standard. And as you say, it's challenging for good reason, because if you made it very easy, then you would really encourage judge shopping. And that's what the court system does not want to do.
This conviction has been hanging over his head for months, a constant reminder that the legal system can and will hold him accountable for his actions. Trump's team had been arguing that the case belonged in federal court because some of the evidence related to actions he took while he was president during his first term. But the appeals court was having none of that argument. They reinforced the conviction and rejected his claims of presidential immunity in language that made absolutely clear they consider his legal arguments weak, unpersuasive, and utterly undeserving of the relief he was seeking through this motion.
Now, the reasoning here was the argument by Trump's lawyers is they basically zeroed in on things she said at sentencing in two other January 6 trials. My understanding is there's actually pretty bedrock Supreme Court precedent on this. And there's a bunch of other cases that they cite in their brief that are judges saying things in public appearances in the press. And Judge Chutkan seems to be focused on saying, look, those are not germane, right? We're talking about what I said at sentencing.
That's exactly right. And the precedent really talks about how judges who are speaking within the courtroom, that speech is particularly scrutinized with a high bar, as opposed to making public pronouncements which might be deemed to be prejudicial. And also the precedent zeroes in on whether the court is speaking about this particular defendant seeking recusal, and she did not address it to Trump's guilt or whether he should be charged. She was addressing arguments made by those defendants trying to lessen their guilt, saying they were influenced.
Judge Alvin Hellerstein emphasized that Trump failed to show good cause for the change, despite his attempts to link evidence to presidential acts that he claimed should be protected from prosecution under various immunity doctrines. That phrase, failed to show good cause, is judge speak for saying that Trump's lawyers did not make a convincing argument and that the motion was basically without merit from a legal standpoint. When a federal judge tells you that you failed to show good cause, that is about as clear a rejection as you can possibly get in legal terms. It means they looked at everything you submitted, all your briefs, all your arguments, all your evidence, and concluded that you have no valid basis for what you are asking the court to do for you. This ruling connects to the broader pattern of courts rejecting Trump's immunity claims across multiple cases and investigations that have been building throughout his second term in office. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit had earlier ruled that Trump's alleged actions, including efforts to overturn the 2020 election, fall outside absolute immunity protection. The courts are making clear over and over again that being president, even being a current president serving right now, does not give you a free pass to avoid accountability for things you did that may have violated the law or harmed the democratic process that put you in office in the first place. Trump's legal team is facing mounting challenges as courts demand full compliance with rulings and limit the excuses they can use to avoid or delay legal proceedings any further. Every motion they file seems to get rejected by judges who are not impressed with their arguments. Every claim they make seems to fall flat when subjected to legal scrutiny by courts that are actually examining the merits. Every assertion of immunity or special treatment gets shot down by judges who are tired of hearing the same weak legal theories over and over again without any new evidence or reasoning to support them. The strategy of delay and obstruct that worked for Trump throughout his business career and his first term is not working anymore. Courts are moving faster and being more decisive in rejecting his claims and forcing him to face the consequences he has been running from for years. Trump reportedly erupted in anger when he learned about this latest defeat, which is understandable given how much his legal team had been counting on this motion to succeed as part of their broader strategy to keep him out of legal jeopardy. When your last hope for escaping accountability gets rejected by a federal appeals court, and when the judge uses language that makes clear your arguments were not even close to persuasive, that is the kind of loss that makes you realize the legal walls are closing in fast and there may be no way out this time. Let me really dig into what happened here, because I think a lot of people do not fully understand what this ruling means and why it is such a devastating blow to Trump's legal strategy across multiple cases that are threatening his presidency and potentially his freedom going forward. This is not just about one motion getting denied in one case. This is about the systematic collapse of the legal defense strategy that Trump has been relying on for years. The core idea behind that strategy was that presidential immunity protects him from accountability and that he can use procedural maneuvers to delay or avoid legal consequences indefinitely until his opponents give up or run out of money or lose interest. Courts are rejecting that strategy over and over again, and this latest ruling is one of the clearest examples yet of judges saying, no, you have to face the same legal system as everyone else, regardless of what office you hold or how powerful you think you are. Let me start with what Trump was actually trying to do with this motion, because understanding that helps explain why the rejection is so significant and why his legal team is running out of options to help him escape accountability for his actions. Trump's lawyers filed a motion to move the Manhattan criminal hush money case, the case where he was already convicted by a jury of his peers, from state court to federal court. Their argument was that some of the evidence in the case related to actions Trump took while he was president during his first term, and therefore the case should be handled in federal court rather than state court because federal courts have jurisdiction over presidential conduct and would apply different legal standards that might be more favorable to their client. This was a strategic move because Trump's team believed they would get more favorable treatment in federal court, and because moving the case could potentially allow them to raise new immunity arguments that they could not raise in state court under New York law. It was essentially a Hail Mary attempt to escape the consequences of a conviction that has already happened by getting the whole case transferred to a different court system where they thought they might have better luck with the judges and the legal standards that would apply to their arguments. This was their last major option for escaping that conviction, and it failed completely when the court saw right through what they were trying to do. Judge Alvin Hellerstein looked at this motion carefully and said, no, Trump failed to show good cause for why the case should be moved from state court to federal court in the first place. The judge examined Trump's arguments that evidence in the case was connected to presidential acts and concluded that those arguments were simply not persuasive enough to justify transferring the case to federal court away from the state prosecutors who brought it and won their conviction against him. This is important because it means that Trump cannot use his time as president as a shield to protect himself from state court prosecutions for conduct that courts have determined was personal or political rather than official official presidential business deserving of immunity protection under the Constitution. The Federal Appeals Court then upheld Judge Hellerstein's ruling, which means Trump has now lost this argument at two levels of the federal court system in decisions that will be very hard to overturn on any further appeal. When you lose at the district court level and then lose again at the appeals court level, your options become very limited going forward and the chances of success become vanishingly small. You can try to appeal to the Supreme Court, but they only take a tiny fraction of the cases that are appealed to them each year. And there is no indication that the Supreme Court would be interested in taking this case, especially given how clearly the lower courts have rejected Trump's arguments as unpersuasive and without legal merit. The D.C. Circuit ruling about immunity is equally important because it establishes clear limits on what presidential immunity actually protects and what falls outside that protection under our constitutional system. Trump's lawyers have been arguing a very expansive theory of immunity, basically that anything a president does while in office is protected from legal scrutiny forever, no matter what the conduct involved or who it harmed. The D.C. Circuit said that is not how it works under the Constitution we actually have. They ruled that Trump's alleged actions related to overturning the 2020 election fall outside absolute immunity protection entirely. This means that Trump can be held accountable for things he did even while he was president if those things were not legitimate exercises of presidential power and were instead personal or political actions designed to benefit himself rather than the country. This distinction between official presidential acts and personal or political conduct is crucial because it determines what Trump can and cannot be prosecuted for going forward in multiple cases. If everything a president did was absolutely immune from prosecution forever, then presidents could commit any crime they wanted while in office and never face consequences for it, no matter how serious the violation. The courts are saying that is not what the Constitution contemplates or allows under any reasonable interpretation of presidential power. There are limits on immunity, real limits that apply to everyone, including presidents, and Trump's conduct, particularly around the 2020 election, falls outside those limits, according to the courts that have examined the question carefully and reviewed all the evidence. Trump's legal team is facing a situation where every major argument they have made is being rejected by courts across the country in case after case after case without exception or meaningful success anywhere. The immunity arguments are failing everywhere they are tried, in state courts and federal courts, and at every level of the judicial system. The procedural arguments are failing to convince judges who have heard these theories before and found them unpersuasive. The attempts to move cases to more favorable venues are failing completely. The delay tactics that worked for years are no longer working because judges are moving faster and being more decisive in rejecting weak arguments without giving Trump's lawyers endless opportunities to refile and retry the same claims. They are running out of tricks and running out of time, as the legal consequences they have been trying to avoid for years are finally catching up to Trump in ways he cannot escape. The broader pattern here is that courts are demanding full compliance from Trump and limiting the excuses his team can use to avoid facing legal proceedings on the merits of the charges against him. In the past, Trump could often use procedural maneuvers to delay cases indefinitely, while his lawyers filed motion after motion and appeal after appeal, buying time and hoping prosecutors would eventually give up or that statutes of limitations would run out. But judges seem to have lost patience with that approach entirely at this point. They are ruling more quickly on motions without allowing endless delays for briefing and argument. They are being more direct in rejecting weak arguments that they view as made in bad faith. And they are making clear that Trump has to face the legal system like anyone else would have to face it without special treatment or endless opportunities to delay proceedings. This connects to everything we have been covering about Trump's legal troubles throughout his second term in office and the mounting challenges he faces from every direction. He is facing challenges on multiple fronts simultaneously. The hush money case, investigations related to January 6th, questions about classified documents, civil cases with massive financial penalties, and now his appointees are being disqualified from serving in positions he tried to install them in by judges who say they lack qualifications or proper authorization. Every week seems to bring new legal defeats for the administration. Every month seems to bring new rulings against him personally. And the cumulative effect is that Trump's legal position is weaker now than it has ever been, even though he is currently serving as president with all the power that office brings. The political implications of these legal defeats are significant because they undermine the image of strength and invincibility that Trump has cultivated throughout his political career and that his supporters believe in deeply and defend passionately. When courts keep rejecting your arguments and ruling against you over and over again, it becomes harder to claim that you are winning and that your enemies are the ones in trouble. It becomes harder to maintain the narrative that the legal system is just persecuting you unfairly when judge after judge, including judges appointed by Republicans, keeps finding that your legal arguments are not persuasive and that you have not met the legal standards required to get the relief you are seeking. Trump's eruption of anger over this ruling reflects the frustration of someone who thought he could avoid accountability forever and is now realizing that the legal system is closing in on him from every direction without any clear escape route available. He has been fighting these battles for years now. He has spent millions and millions of dollars on lawyers and legal fees. He has tried every procedural trick in the book that has ever worked for anyone in legal history. And he keeps losing anyway because the fundamental weakness of his legal position cannot be overcome through money or bluster or political pressure, no matter how hard he tries or how loud he complains about the unfairness of it all. The most immediate consequence of this latest ruling is that the hush money conviction stands, and Trump cannot escape it by moving the case to federal court, where he hoped to get more favorable treatment from judges he thought would be sympathetic to his arguments. He will have to face whatever sentencing or consequences flow from that conviction in state court where he was originally prosecuted by the Manhattan District Attorney and where the jury found him guilty on the charges. The broader legal battles will continue as Trump fights cases related to January 6th and other investigations that are still working through the court system at various stages of litigation and appeal. But each defeat makes the next fight harder because it establishes precedent and signals to other courts that Trump's legal arguments are not persuasive and should not be credited when they come up again in future cases. Judges communicate with each other, not directly about specific cases, of course, but through their rulings and opinions that other judges read and consider when making their own decisions. When multiple courts reach the same conclusion about Trump's immunity claims, it becomes increasingly difficult for other courts to reach different conclusions without strong new evidence or arguments. For Trump personally, this is another devastating blow in a series of devastating blows that are systematically destroying the legal strategy his team has relied on for years to protect him from accountability. The immunity arguments are failing everywhere they are tested. The procedural maneuvers are being rejected by judges who are not impressed. The delay tactics are no longer working because courts have lost patience, and the consequences he has been running from are finally catching up to him in ways that he cannot escape through money or bluster or political pressure, no matter how hard he tries. For the country, this matters because it demonstrates that the legal system can still hold powerful people accountable even when they fight with every resource available to them, including the power of the presidency itself. Trump has more money and more lawyers and more political support than almost anyone who faces the legal system in America. And he is still losing because his legal position is fundamentally weak and courts are doing their job of applying the law fairly. The Republican Party is watching these developments closely because they affect the political landscape heading into the midterms next year when control of Congress will be decided by voters across the country. Republicans in competitive races have to decide whether to defend Trump and his legal strategies or distance themselves from someone who keeps losing in court. For voters, these court rulings provide important information about what Trump actually did and whether courts believe he violated the law based on the evidence they have reviewed. When courts reject immunity claims and allow prosecutions to proceed, it means judges have concluded there is enough evidence of potential wrongdoing to justify legal scrutiny and accountability. Trump erupted in anger over this ruling because he knows what it means for his future and his freedom. He knows his options are narrowing every day. He knows the legal walls are closing in from every direction, and he knows that the strategy of delay and denial that worked for him for decades is finally failing when he needs it most. What we are witnessing is the legal system doing exactly what it is supposed to do, holding powerful people accountable and rejecting claims of special treatment that have no basis in law or the Constitution. That is uncomfortable for Trump, but that is how democracy works when it is functioning properly. Keep watching because this story is far from over, and every new ruling brings us closer to the ultimate resolution of these unprecedented legal battles that will define Trump's legacy and set precedents for presidential accountability for generations to come.